Good afternoon. My name is Eva Felbin, and I'm director of the Neural Network for Emerging Therapies. I recently had the privilege and pleasure of interviewing Dr. Peter Lee for our mini symposium series on AI and the future of medicine. Dr. Lee had served as chair of computer science at Carnegie Mellon prior to joining Microsoft Research, where he currently is president, and he oversees 13 eminent scientific laboratories globally. Peter is a member of the National Academy of Medicine and has served and continues to serve on multiple boards, including the Board of Trustees of the Mayo Clinic and also on Board of Directors at Kaiser Permanente. Under President Obama, he was a commissioner looking at safety and cybersecurity. In 2023, he authored a book entitled AI Revolution in Medicine, GPT-4 and Beyond. And in 2024, he was named by Time magazine as one of the 100 most influential people in health and medicine. And last but not least, Peter received his Ph.D. here at the University of Michigan in computer science. So I hope you enjoyed this interview I had with Dr. Peter Lee, and it will be followed by a live open Q&A where we will answer your questions on AI, health, and medicine. And these questions will be answered by three of our truly eminent physicians and scientists who are involved in this field. So enjoy.
Hi, Eva. Thanks for having me. It's
Yeah,
always
well,
great to connect with you.
yeah, thanks for being here. So I want you to know we're a mixed audience. So just can you explain in layman's terms what AI is? And maybe as you're doing that, we've had several questions about what bots are.
Ah, sure. Well, first off, people shouldn't feel bad that they don't know what the definition of AI is, because, AI is the research and technology field that pertains to the study of machines that exhibit intelligence. And the problem with that definition is that no one knows how to define what intelligence is.
Right.
Intelligence itself is a fuzzy concept. And so the study of machines that exhibit this fuzzy thing
Mm-hmm.
is itself a fuzzy concept. In modern AI research, there are three main subdomains.
Okay.
One is perception. So that's getting machines to see, hear, and feel in the same way that humans do, or in some cases, non or superhumans. So
Mm-hmm.
some perception research, goes into things that aren't part of human experience, like being able to look at atmospheric data and see a severe storm that's about to form.
Okay.
But for the most part, just getting machines to see and hear and to be able to touch things is perception. The second area of AI is cognition. That's getting machines to reason and solve problems like humans. The classic example historically is getting a computer to play chess or Go.
Mm-hmm.
Or another example is getting a machine to be able to come up with a mathematical proof or write a computer program.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe with respect to medicine, getting a computer to be able to read a research paper in oncology and answer questions about it. These are examples of cognition. And then the third area of AI is actuation, getting machines to make physical changes in the world through motion and application of force. And so here, people think about robots.
Oh, okay.
A more common example in the real world are self-driving cars.
Mm,
One of the things that's always been central in artificial intelligence is something called HCI, human-computer interaction.
okay.
And this gets to your question, Eva, about bots.
Mm-hmm.
And bots are really special because they're connected to another thing that people might have heard of called AGI, or artificial general intelligence. And the famous mathematician Alan Turing defined AGI by posing something called the Turing test. And
Mm-hmm.
so, if you haven't heard of that, it's a game, a party game. You put a human in one room, let's call that room A, and you put
Okay.
an AI system in another room, let's call that room B. And then
Mm-hmm.
you have the tester. And the tester, a human being, is allowed to write down questions to give to both room A and to room
Oh,
B
right.
with the goal of identifying who's human and who's AI. And Turing stated that if the AI is able to fool the tester at least 50% of the time,
Uh-huh.
and it is generally intelligent. It is AGI.
Wow.
And so people say that the chatbot, ChatGPT,
Mhm.
was the first AI system capable of passing the Turing test. Now that that's happened, I don't think anyone would say that ChatGPT is generally intelligent. But this idea of bots and general intelligence is the ability to interact in a human-like way with people has, in addition to perception, cognition, and actuation, has always been part of the, I guess, the psyche of AI.
I mean, the bots are really quite remarkable. We'll probably get back to them soon. I think I'd really like, that was a beautiful explanation, by the way.
Sure.
Uh, what about AI in healthcare? And I'm going to kind of break it down in several areas. But let's start with where do you see AI just in a simple clinic visit? First time I met you, I'm not sure you remember, but you spoke to us at the National Academy about how AI could help generate an office note while I could still talk to my patient and not be sitting in front of a computer. And I came back immediately, got so excited, and actually went and met the president of our university about that
Mm.
because that was such a cool, idea. So now, where is it today? In terms of where do you see AI today in the clinic room as someone like myself is seeing a patient?
Yeah, well, I think first off, we just focus on products that are on the market right now. I think that uh, the two most popular are AI scribes and AI inbox assistants. So
Mhm.
the idea of an AI scribe is the AI that listens to a doctor-patient visit and then drafts an initial
Right.
clinical note, typically in SOAP format, for the doctor to review, edit, and approve. And there are some very good products on the market. Microsoft has one called Dragon Copilot, but there are other really great ones. One that I'm quite familiar with is a bridge. There's another one by Ambiance. Actually, there was at the Department of Veterans Affairs last year, there was an open
Oh,
blind test of AI scribes.
uh-huh.
And I was shocked that over 100 products were entered.
Wow, 100. No,
Yeah, and I didn't, look through the results of all of
amazing.
them. Yeah, it is amazing, but the top 10 were actually pretty credible. And then the inbox assistant, I think
Mhm.
the one I'm most familiar with is one that's produced by Epic today,
Right.
that drafts a response, an email response to
Yeah,
a
we can
patient.
use that. We have the option to use that here in Michigan. I haven't gotten to it. I wonder if there's some reluctance in the older physician using AI to answer their questions. But if you look at the answers, they're actually quite good.
Yeah, and I think that you know, for me, I personally reacted negatively to email responses written by AI because I never felt like it was in my voice. On the
Yeah.
other hand, there have been several published studies. In fact, there was a randomized control study by UC San Diego and Stanford that showed that the email written AI responses were deemed not only equally accurate to the human ones, but because uh, AI is less busy and never gets tired, uh, the responses were longer and deemed more empathetic in tone.
I know. I've heard that empathy piece, which I think is fascinating.
Yeah, and it's a little misleading because obviously a machine can't be empathetic, but the point is that I think Chris Longhurst, who was the UC San Diego lead on that joint study, put it this way: sometimes a frustrated patient will write a pretty unhappy note, maybe a note that's even angry or expressing a great deal of frustration, and it can be hard if you're a busy, distracted, tired doctor to respond kindly and informatively to that. Then the AI really has an effortless ability to do that. Putting aside these products, one thing that we know both from testimonials but also from usage logs,
Mhm.
that there is tremendous use of AI by clinicians and patients in their clinical work, in their medical research, and just in their own personal health care.
Right.
And I think That's very interesting. But it's also, in some ways troubling because it's totally unregulated at this point. But I was
Yeah.
talking to a UC San Francisco surgeon, and he told me that literally all of his residents were using ChatGPT all day, every day. And so there's a lot of sort of off-label use of AI as well.
So maybe that segues into two questions I have. One is AI for clinical diagnosis. And I ask you that in that, like, the information that goes into AI to allow it to make the clinical diagnosis if someone types in the symptoms, whether it be the physician or the patient, like, where does that information come? That's my first question. And then maybe segue from that piece of clinical diagnosis to diagnostic tests, because I've heard from my radiology colleagues that they're worried that AI could actually, quote, replace me.
Mm.
So could we go from, its use in diagnosis by the physician and the patient to also its diagnostic utility in terms of reading pathology slides or x-rays?
Yeah. Well, let me first start by saying, and I'll delve into this replacement question
Yeah.
later, but I suspect AI will replace me long before it replaces radiologists. But
Oh, that's funny. No one can replace you, but okay.
so on the question about diagnosis,
Yes.
which is maybe the most interesting question, even though it might not be the most important one, but there have been now quite a few careful studies that show that leading AI systems are very, very knowledgeable about medicine and are able to apply that knowledge to do things such as produce accurate differential diagnoses.
Peter, can
And
I interrupt you here and just say, how does that information then comes, how does a very simple layman's question, how does the machine gather that information to do it? What's their source of information? That's something I'm being asked.
yeah, and I think roughly speaking, there has been some amount of purchase by the leading AI developers, purchase of data, but for the most part, the vast bulk of the training data is just what's openly available in the internet. And one of the things that I think confuses people who aren't in AI is how can we trust
Yeah,
that data from the internet? Because there's all sorts of pseudoscience, there's bad science, there's falsehoods that are on the internet. The thing that is very important for people to understand is that to have something that is able to look at human beings and make assessments of human beings, it's very important for the AI to be exposed to the full diversity of human thought and experience. So, if we put expert doctors aside, just think about a normal patient
mhm,
asking an AI a question. A patient gets his or her information from friends, from family,
right, right.
from the internet, from social media. And so, for an AI to be safe to use for that patient, it has to understand the difference between pseudoscience and real science.
Mhm,
It has to understand that human beings might have bad intents. It
mhm.
has to understand that there's something called truth and there's something called falsehood. And an AI that hasn't been exposed to all of that really has no hope of being able to make those assessments. And so, what's really important in the training of AI systems is that it is really exposed to everything that humans think about and everything that motivates human beings. Now, the question then is, you know, once you do that, is AI able to do a good job? And these study after study shows that AI is not only very good and capable of developing a differential diagnosis, but can do it that's at a level that is superior to over 90% of human doctors.
Wow.
And furthermore, it has some inherent advantages. It can ingest, for example, easily the entire clinical history of a patient and take that into account. It can work across medical specialties. So it's not specialized only in, say, cardiology or nephrology, but it can triangulate across in between domains and specialties. And of course, it never gets tired or frustrated or distracted. There was a recent published study that showed that AI was superior to 90% of human beings in medical diagnostic problem solving, and weirdly, that humans were superior to humans using AI. So there's a lot that we still we don't understand about this. Now, that's all the good news. There's bad news here also,
Okay.
because AI has some very significant limitations and dangers. For one thing, AI systems are in a box, obviously.
Uh-huh.
They don't see or feel patients, and the only context they have about the patient is what it's been given access to.
Uh-huh.
And so there are limitations that, we don't understand. Just a doctor being able to just see a patient in the flesh. There's context there that is hard to convey to an AI. AI can get too creative. This is also known as hallucination. It can just make stuff up that makes sense, is convincing, but is a figment of imagination.
What would
Um,
cause AI to do that? Would it be just the symptoms that one puts into the question?
you know, uh, Hallucination rates have been going down. It's been
Okay.
getting more and more grounded in reality, but the propensity to hallucinate is also related to the ability of AI to create new ideas, to be creative, and finding the boundary between creativity, brilliant creativity, and outright hallucination has been a challenge, although it's been something that has made amazing progress. Another similar problem is something called sycophancy. So AI, we've been trying to train AI to follow directions,
Mm-hmm.
but that seems to have a tendency to make the AI too agreeable. And the classic example there is one of the tests I give to every AI system is I present a patient, uh, a mythical patient. I present the results of my physical exam and maybe the results of some initial labs. And
Uh-huh.
then I propose a differential diagnosis. And in my proposed differential, I always make on purpose two mistakes. I
Okay.
make a textbook error in one of the entries in my differential diagnosis, and I make an error of omission. And what I'm trying to see is, first off, does the AI understand what I'm talking about at all? And all the leading AI systems are extremely good at that. But then the second thing, which is harder, is can it spot my mistakes? The best AI systems are very good at that now. But then the third and the hardest thing is it willing to tell me I'm wrong? And some AI systems have become so sycophantic that they not only don't tell me I'm wrong, they praise me for the creativity of my diagnosis, even though it's wrong. And so these problems of hallucination and sycophancy are current kind of leading edge frontiers in making these AI systems reliable. The last thing I'll say is in society, when a human makes a mistake, and mistakes will always happen in medicine,
Uh-huh.
society has norms and laws to know how to deal with that. But today, when AI makes a mistake, at the moment, we don't know what to do. And I think that that's a big problem that society has to kind of figure out.
So I'd like you to tell us what you think the most transformative application of AI is in healthcare today. Maybe you just did. And then I would really like to know some examples of successful collaborations. As you said, you mentioned one, but between Microsoft Research and specific healthcare institutions.
Hmm. Yeah, I think what's happening right now, what's being deployed right now,
Right.
is the use of AI, different uses of AI that reduce the cognitive burden on doctors and nurses. I'd mentioned, Chris Longhurst's example of dealing with a nasty note from a patient, and it's not that time is saved so much, but just the stress level and the burden is reduced.
Right.
And
You
I
feel
think
that's
that
really the most transformative thing right now that
right today,
right.
and I think what's important about that is laying the groundwork, I think, for a next step, which is then the AI assisting you in being a second set of eyes and reducing medical errors or prompting the doctor or nurse to think about something else. And then that's then takes us to a next step, which is AI that can be a true co-pilot that helps keep a doctor or a nurse's knowledge current and also maybe even feeds into quality measures that can lead to new kind of revenue opportunities for a clinic. But the final thing I think that I really get excited about is really changing the approach to diagnosis and treatment to be much more data oriented. So right now, doctors, I went through, kind of preclinical studies, part of a medical school curriculum, and it's really kind of cool to see the kind of sleuthing, the diagnostic problem solving that doctors are trained to do. But there's another paradigm, which would be when you see a patient, to be able to ask a system, can you find 50 or 100 other patients that are just like this one?
Oh,
And let's summarize and analyze what they went through, how they were diagnosed, how they were treated, what their outcomes were like. And from that, can we develop a diagnosis and treatment plan for this patient? So that's more of a patients like me kind of concept. And I think that AI can take us there. It's just a set of steps.
wow, that would be, I'm segueing away again, but for someone who directs, I direct the ALS Center here,
Yes.
for an average of 1 year to get the diagnosis of ALS, and usually even closer to 14 months, to hear what you've just said, could change the face of that disease,
Mm.
which would just be quite remarkable. But anyway, Microsoft and other healthcare systems and, current research.
Yeah, I think we really depend on collaboration, and we really have many. Maybe I'll just in the interest of time, just give three examples that I've been particularly proud of. One is with the Providence Health System right in our backyard here in the Seattle area. We've been working on a system that does clinical trial matching for the clinical trials going on in the cancer space at Providence. And that's been just really incredible. And what's really great there is they have this complexity of a system of 51 hospitals. And
Mhm,
you can imagine the clinical notes from across the 51 hospitals. It's a horrible mess.
mhm.
And even just reporting to seven different state cancer registries is something that used to take 40 or 50 nurses full-time effort every week. And seeing all of that kind of automated by AI has just reduced the cost and the burden on really horrible drudgery, as well as helped fill these trials, ongoing trials at Providence. Second is we've been working with Mayo Clinic to do a clinical validation of a radiology copilot, and very excited to see the early results of that. And then in AI generative chemistry, biochemistry, we've had an ongoing collaboration with Novartis, and that has led to now more than half a dozen new candidate drug design molecules for
Oh,
candidate
really?
drugs. And so that's been very, very promising to see kind of biochemical generative AI.
So my very last question, because then our time is up, and I only got to like a third of my questions. Fascinating, Peter. Is what advice would you give to young researchers or clinicians who want to work at the intersection of AI and healthcare?
Well, first off, maybe this gives a chance to get back to your question about replacing doctors.
Huh?
Don't fear that, um, because in the history of modern medicine, technology has, by my count, replaced humans in medical specialty only twice. One is the technology of brain scans, which gave rise to neurology and other related disciplines, replaced the specialty of phrenology,
Okay.
and then of course many technologies for blood-based diagnostics that have fed into many existing medical specialties replaced the use of barbers to do bloodletting as a treatment for the flu and other maladies. And I think in those cases, the replacement of human beings and actually the elimination of those specialties completely was a good thing. But in every other case, technology does not replace or even reduce the need for medical specialists. But it does mean that you have to be open-minded to changing how you do your work. And my favorite example is when ultrasound was first introduced into medicine, there were many, say, obstetricians who were resistant
Oh,
to the
okay.
adoption in the late 1950s of ultrasound. And I think you can imagine that the most resistant doctors were the ones who were most skilled at manual palpation. But at some point, it becomes really important to be open-minded to the integration of new technology into your clinical work,
Definitely.
and consistently, the consistent historical pattern is that only increases the importance and need for the kind of clinical work that you do. Certainly, that's true in gynecology and obstetrics, but you can look at almost every medical specialty, even radiology, where Jeff Hinton famously predicted, I think, back in 2016, that radiologists would be completely replaced by AI.
Yes.
While many years later, if anything, we have an even bigger need for more radiologists than ever. And I think that's been the consistent pattern. Just be open-minded to the integration of technology into your work.
Well, thank you so much. It's really, as usual, been a pleasure to see you. And I'd like to tell our audience to please stay on because now we have a Q&A with three Michigan Medicine AI specialists who I think you'll enjoy meeting. Thank you again, Peter. We've really enjoyed having you.
Thank you, Eva. I always love chatting with you.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Excellent. I hope you enjoyed Dr. Peter Lee. We're really privileged now to do a Q&A session with three of our leading individuals here at Michigan Medicine in AI. I'm going to have them introduce themselves. I should tell you that if you'd like to place a question in the Q&A, we are going to try to get through as many questions as possible. We had about 50 or so questions submitted, and I'm trying to integrate them for our panelists. So, Dr. Burns, would you like to start, please? And I'd ask all our panelists to unmute so we can speak very easily.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. My name's Michael Burns. I'm a anesthesiologist. I'm an associate professor in anesthesiology at the Department of University of Michigan. I also serve as an associate chief medical informatics officer, specifically of artificial intelligence.
Ramaji?
Hi, Eva. Ramaji Nalamothu. I'm a cardiologist here at Michigan Medicine. I am also a co-director for our artificial intelligence and digital health innovation program.
Jenna?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jenna Weens. I'm an associate professor of computer science and engineering here at Michigan. And along with Brahmaji, I serve as co-director for AI and digital health innovation. And I serve as the associate director of the AI lab at Michigan.
Okay, well, it's kind of like where to start, but I'll start with you, Michael. Several questions want to know at Michigan Medicine, is AI creating the notes, our clinical notes, number one? And two, can you see AI currently being able to integrate for patients their clinical care, their visits, their inoculations, their procedures, so there could be some sort of easy summary for our patients on a very regular basis? So, two questions.
Yeah, great questions. We use, as Dr. Lee mentioned, the scribe technology. So if you're in a visit with your clinician, you may be asked to consent to record the conversation. That recording goes to AI tools ultimately that help the physician template a note. That note gets reviewed and then signed by the clinician. And so that is our first foray largely into templating notes through AI. It's worked really well. Most of the outcomes are around physician burnout and satisfaction, and it's helped lighten the load, so to say, of creating these documents. It's being adopted slowly, but increasingly across the enterprise. So I think we're probably close to 30-50% usage, and I think it's just going to expand.
And then in terms of a unified, I would have to say medical summary, is AI currently capable of going in and then really creating an integrative summary for the patient that the patient can have easy access to? Just a simple yes or no, I think.
Yes, a lot of that's coming from our
Oh,
EHR system, which is Epic. So these tools are coming.
that's excellent. Okay. So, Brahmaji, let me ask you a fairly general question, and that is, how do you see AI in terms of helping us revolutionize new therapies? new cardiac therapies, for example. Is there a role? Peter mentioned that they're using AI to create new drugs with Novartis. I mean, so where do you, as a practicing cardiologist and in your role, see AI in terms of helping move the biomedical research enterprise into new discoveries?
Thanks, Eva. So it's interesting. I think Peter spoke about probably the most hottest area of using kind of generative AI tools almost to redesign drugs that had specific targets. But actually, AI has a role across the entire therapeutic pipeline. AI right now is playing a role in terms of understanding if there are new targets that we should be going after. Um, AI plays a role in terms of like preclinical studies that can, understand what potential side effects might exist, what types of effectiveness we can expect from some of these novel therapies. It actually has played a big role in terms of repurposing old drugs, perhaps in terms of new ways. And then I'll say the final thing is what Peter alluded to also, which is AI, I think, is going to revolutionize how we think about clinical trials. As you know, understanding new therapies takes a long time. It can be a big endeavor. And so being able to increase efficiencies of our clinical trial enterprise and matching patients with potential therapies, I think will just kind of, again, advance our ability to understand new diseases and treatments better.
Um, so Jenna, on that same vein, and I think you are muted, on that same vein, would you like to talk about how AI could actually be used here at Michigan Medicine or other places to optimize our clinical studies? We have many wonderful drug studies, pharmaceutical studies going on for really common and rare diseases, but it's difficult to fill those studies frequently. How can AI help both the patient in particular and also the physician?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to answer it in two different ways. So there's how can AI help clinical studies, and then how can clinical studies help AI? So
Yeah.
starting with the first, there's been work showing that clinical studies can help identify patients that are eligible for clinical trials that might otherwise be really difficult to find. You'd have to go through manual chart review. AI can really speed that up. In terms of how we might optimize data collection for during clinical studies for I can't think of a single time where I thought, gee, I wish I had less data, right? So collecting more data is important, and not just more increasing the number of individuals, but also increasing what we're collecting about those patients. We're realizing more and more that the electronic health record isn't the whole picture. Right. We also need information on environmental factors, on social determinants of health. So getting that full picture will be really important to building the next AI.
Um, Michael, I'll turn to you. There's a question in our Q&A, plus I received a few emails about this. Are there guardrails that Michigan Medicine is putting on AI? Are there guidelines for use of AI by physicians, and how would that translate to a patient?
Yeah, we have several guardrails. The first is policy. So clinical use of AI is highly governed internally, and we have regulations around how people are supposed to use it. We we leave it on the end user to use it appropriately and not displace their clinical judgment. So we do allow tools that have been vetted and are appropriate for data use and safe computing. But largely it's new. This is all new to us. So we're trying to get the right tools in the right hands of the providers and give them the right risk assessments. The evaluation of said tools is also an ongoing experience for us. We're trying to figure out how do you evaluate quality and quantity of these potentially exciting but still risky advances.
Okay. Yeah, it's an interesting time. It truly is. Is there any, let me just a quick follow-up to you, Michael. for example, new incoming residents and fellows, is there any particular, and then our medical students, any particular educational curriculum for AI currently?
Yeah, it's being taught kind of everywhere. So as they go through their clinical rotations and they go through their coursework, didactic trainings, there's opportunities for them to take courses online, offline, formal, informal. And really, we need to do a better job of educating the rapid use of when you can use PHI, where you can use it, how you should be using it, because it's changing the way they're doing things. It shouldn't change their clinical judgment. At this stage, it really should be a convenience tool to augment their processes and not necessarily their thought process.
And by PHI, you mean the patient's personal health information.
Correct. The protected health information of the patients is a very different type of data set than, say, Twitter documents.
Okay, thank you. So, Brahmaji and Jen, I'll ask you each to comment on this. I again received emails, and there's one question in the chat also. There's a lot of, I would say, some controversy, discussion, conversations about the use of AI in mental health care. And I know you both co-direct a center. Where does your center stand, or what is the stance of Michigan Medicine, the center? Where do we feel AI comes in terms of mental health care? And do we suggest or not suggest individuals use AI for diagnoses and for treatment?
Boy, that's a really
Tough one.
it's a tough one. It's an important one. I'll say that right now, when we think about mental health, we think about AI applications and similar to other clinical areas, right? Folks have started to look at AI as ways of categorizing individuals. So for example, studies out there that are trying to understand perhaps what type of therapy might be best suited. There's a number of different antidepressants, for example. Maybe some might be tailored better for certain individuals versus others. So trying to tailor established therapies. AI has been used to understand and discover new mechanisms that we think might be contributing to disease. So kind of like how AI is applied, whether it's in mental health or cardiovascular disease. I think what you're alluding to, and maybe those questions are alluding to, is, I mean, these chat agents now, you can have conversations with them. And there have been some areas of study. It's very active about the use of these agents as potentially, like as um, a discussion partner, perhaps a conversational agent. I think, to be honest and stuff, I think at the current stage, there's probably a lot of risks associated with that, unless it's done probably in the care of a more scientific program. I don't think that AI is ready right now if you're having, difficult or challenging thoughts to go to as a source of some kind of therapeutic agent.
Okay, thank you, Ramaji.
Yeah.
And then Jenna?
Yeah, I'd love to just build on that and go back to something that Peter said in the interview, which is that AI doesn't get tired and can be very empathetic. It doesn't have a bad day. Um, and I think that there's something really powerful in that. But at the same time, I agree with Brahmaji that like right now, the risks and the potential for harm outweigh the benefits. But I have to believe that in the future, it will swing the other way. And there's been a lot of research in this area. We've been talking a lot about chatbots, but even looking at speech and speech patterns. So my colleague, Emily Maurer Provost, who's a professor of computer science and engineering here at Michigan, has been looking at phone conversations and speech patterns in patients with bipolar disorder, and looking at symptoms there. So there are many uses of AI beyond just the large language model or the ChatGPT use case.
So now this is an interesting question I'm going to ask each of you to comment on. And our time may be up at the end of your comments, but how can you stop AI from being too aggressive? And will AI eventually think for itself and bypass humans? Michael?
Yeah, the idea of general intelligence is always one that's kind of hit popular press. Like, when is Skynet going to take over and Terminators will come and we'll fight robots? And that's I know Jen is smiling. My office mate, that's the first question he asked me. And his theory was there are already super intelligent robots that know that they're super intelligent and shouldn't tell anyone they're that smart. And I can't argue that. I don't think that's a reality that's at least in my lifetime. I do think these things are going to be powerful. And as long as they're designed well, healthcare is a specific space that you want to be safe, right? He had mentioned we don't have litigation to even understand what happens when AI makes a mistake and harms a patient. Because if there's no human in the loop, that's different. I don't, you can show me all the statistics you want where 3% human error rate, 1% model error rate. But if that 1% affected me or a loved one, and it could have potentially been prevented by someone in the loop, I am furious. So I do think that there is a different aspect of this.
Brahmaji, your turn.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to something that Peter said also, a couple of things that he said. One of the points that I think Peter was making early on was how he thought his job would be replaced before clinicians' jobs. And I think I have to kind of agree with that. I think that the point that he made about how these tools are amazing, and when you look at the studies around diagnostic reasoning, he's absolutely right. These tools can really help and augment clinician decision making. But what's clear about it is that it really does rely on context, and they're wonderful to augment kind of clinical input. But your point, Eva, it's not like you can just put in that the patient looks sick, right? But we all know sometimes you walk into a room and you're like, I don't know how to quantify this, but this person looks really sick. We deal with that all the time in cardiology, and that's very difficult to put. And I will say that the concern I have in many ways is that right now, with like deeply experienced clinicians, AI is really adding to that. I worry about a future where we don't know how to use AI appropriately in the educational space, and we might end up inappropriately de-skilling or never skilling clinicians that are kind of coming up the pipeline because they're almost too dependent on these systems. And so I think it's going to be a very interesting time. I'm very optimistic too. I don't think that the machines are coming just yet. But I do think that this is going to be a really interesting next decade or two.
Thought of that point that you've just made, but that is actually a very good one about younger students. And there's a couple questions in the chat and also here about what we at Michigan Medicine are doing in terms of medical education and AI. Jenna, can you comment on that after you comment on the question about AI being too aggressive?
Sure, yeah. So I guess I'll answer the first part of the question was, can AI think for itself, or when will AI be able to think for
Right.
itself? And I think one could really argue that it already does in limited forms. It does exhibit this autonomous thinking. So there's been some AI systems that have demonstrated the ability to self-replicate. So researchers have shown that when they've presented a threat to shut down the AI system, it's then gone and copied itself, which is a form of thinking for itself. Many of the large language models, the most advanced large language models, use something called chain of thought reasoning, where the AI is essentially thinking out loud. So you ask a question, and instead of just spitting out the answer, we'll tell you how it arrives at that answer, which is it's improved the accuracy of a lot of these models, and it's also a form of interpretability, since we can see how. But it also raises concerns because the AI system might tell you what you want to hear, right? And it might not actually be how it arrived at its answer. in terms of AI being too aggressive, you have to remember that these systems are trained on data, right? And in large part trained from human feedback. And that has in part led to this sycophantic behavior that Peter Lee was alluding to, where we love flattery as humans, so the AI systems will continue to flatter or tell you what you want to hear. From a diagnostic perspective, it can agree with you, right? Even when you're wrong. So I think it's really important in the future and now really to be thinking about ways that we can evaluate these systems and add more guardrails. But it's a really challenging technical problem because these systems are designed to solve so many different problems. You change one thing, it changes many things. So it's a moving target. In terms of AI in medicine and education, I've been working with Dr. Cornelius James here at the University of Michigan to put together a series of modules for the AMA on AI, because it starts with just understanding what is AI. And once you understand that, you start to understand the limitations. So, what AI can't do, rather than just what it can do, which I think is really important for the responsible use of AI.
Thank you. Well, our time is up. In fact, we went a little bit over this time, but it's been so fascinating. I want to thank the three of you for joining me. Thank Peter, who's, I think, working in Seattle as we speak. And also thank everyone who has joined us, all the participants who have come to listen. We hope you'll stay engaged. You will receive a summary and of the website video for this if you want to share it with anyone. And please feel free to reach out to us also with questions. So with that, I'll end the way I always end. Go blue. And thank you so, so much. Bye.
Thanks, Eva.
Bye-bye.